What's going on, guys? Chris Cook in Nashville here. I'm going to show you today how I do steaks in my kitchen. I have these three beautiful sirloin steaks. These are a little leaner than I would normally eat, but they were on sale. So these have been sitting about an hour, coming to room temperature. I'm going to use paper towel and pat them dry. You want to get this excess liquid off of your steaks before you actually brown them in a skillet, because if you don't, they steam and you do not get the right color and the right crust on your steaks. So we're going to pat those dry. Now you can see my stainless steel skillet here is what I'm using. You can use stainless steel, cast iron, whatever. It just needs a heavy bottom because that's a lot of steak that we're going to put in there. That heavy bottom is going to hold the heat. So a heavy bottomed skillet of some kind that can handle heat. I'm generously salting them. Do not use other spices or herbs or anything if you're into that kind of thing on your steaks as a carnivore until the last part. You do not want to put those on and allow this to start to burn. So what we need to do is just use salt and then add our spices later on. So I have my pan preheating right now. You can see that's on a medium high, starting to push high heat. Now my stove runs fairly hot up at this level, so you want to get this nice and hot. So I'm letting it preheat for a few minutes, and then this is lard. You can use any kind of animal fat that you want except butter, because butter will burn, but you could use ghee, beef tallow. I really like the flavor of lard, and you can see how hot this pan is. It is starting to smoke. Okay, you want the pan really nice and hot because that steak is going to suck all of the heat out of that pan as soon as you set it in there. So I'm going to take my steak, laying it salt side down, and I know you can't hear it, but there is a very serious sizzle sound happening. If you don't hear a sizzle and you don't see steam and smoke starting to come out of that pan, your pan is not hot enough. So I'm going to put those down into this nice hot preheated pan. And you'll notice I waited to put the lard in there until it was already preheated. That's part of what helps this not stick. You want your pan heated before your fat goes in there. Now I'm going to very heavily salt the other side of the steak as well. This is going to help pull some of the moisture out of the surface of these steaks, and that's how we're going to get that really nice crust. Okay, so I've got them in a really nice hot pan with a heavy bottom, which is going to handle the meat. I've salted the first side, laid it down onto its salted side, and now I'm heavily salting the second side, okay? So we're going to let these sit for a few minutes, and we're not going to touch them, and I'm going to show you what we do next. Okay, I've got my tongs here, so you need something you can grab it with, but I'm not poking, I'm not sliding, I'm not doing anything to these steaks. Let them sit. They will loosen from the pan when that crust has been developed and when they are ready. But if you put them in there and you start poking them and sliding them around, you will make them stick, and it's going to pull all of your crust right off of your steak. Okay, these steaks have been in the pan for about 3 minutes. Do you see how it just easily slides? You know that it's ready to be flipped because it's starting to slide. Now, if you like a little more of a darker crust, you can totally leave it longer. But when I know that it can slide freely on the pan, I know it's ready to be flipped. So I just gently push the side of it. It immediately slides, and I know it's ready to flip. So now I'm going to flip these over, and I'm going to cook them on the other side. Okay, so now these steaks are not going to be cooked through very far, but you can see the beautiful crust that I'm getting. We'll worry about cooking them through in a moment, but right now we just need that really nice high heat to get those steaks crusted. Now I'm pushing it down against the skillet because I want to make sure there is good contact. These steaks are pretty big. I'm using the largest stainless steel skillet I have, but push it down to make sure you get really good contact. And you can see it is still smoking, steaming, and it's doing its thing. And we can season these now because we've put them on the second side. I'm going to sprinkle just a little seasoning over top of the steaks. Now, depending on how hot your skillet is and how long you're going to be cooking these, based on how thick the meat is, you may want to wait a little longer. But these, because of the thickness of them, I was able to go ahead and season them. I just put a little garlic and onion powder on them. That's totally optional. You don't have to season them with anything other than salt if you don't want to, but I just liked a little bit of something extra on these, and then I put just a little black pepper. Now, I'm basically only going to season these on the one side. I may add a little bit of extra seasoning later, but I don't have to. Once I've got them down, I'm going to take 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter and drop it into that skillet. That is going to start melting. So this is already in contact with the skillet on the second side. And then after the steaks are starting to sear on that side, then is when I'm going to add this butter and start to melt this down. And I'm going to show you how we use that butter to baste this and get a beautiful crust on steaks. Now you can also see as I'm shaking and tilting the pan, those steaks are trying to slide and move because that pan is nice and hot and those steaks are already loosened up, so that means that crust is forming. I'm just getting that butter to spread around in the pan, and then I'm going to set that down, leave them alone for a minute, and if need be, I'm going to turn the temperature down on my stove, and I'm going to use this melted butter, and now with a spoon, we're going to start basting these steaks. Okay, so all I've done is I've moved the steaks in the pan slightly so that I can use the handle to push down and keep the pan tilted. And I'm using a spoon to take this boiling hot butter and I'm basting these steaks. Move them around a little bit if you need to so that you can get everything up away from the edge and tilt that pan back and use that hot butter to baste this side of the steak. This is also going to help cook those spices that we added to the top of the steak. So if you are putting extra spices on your steak, this is how we're going to get those cooked so that they're not raw flavored, but we don't burn them either. Okay, so I've been basting these for a couple of minutes. You can see the butter is starting to turn dark brown and the steaks have been nicely basted. Now that butter also helps cool things down so you don't burn your steaks. I didn't really have to turn my pan down here, but if you do, that's totally fine because you don't want to overcook it. And what we're going to do is test for how done they are. So that's going to be rare, that's going to be medium rare, that's going to be medium, that's going to be medium well, and if you make a fist and push there, that is well done. That's what your meat should feel like when it's cooked, so you know approximately how cooked that is. And then I'm going to flip these over and show you the other side of this. Now this is the side that we have really crusted nicely with that butter. And this is where if you wanted to add just a little extra seasoning, you could, but look at the crust on these steaks. Absolutely beautiful. These are going to be so good. I'm going to add just a little bit more pepper to this side of the steaks. And then something else that I really love to do is put some Redmond's smoked salt on this. I don't have a grill and I live in a place where I can't have one right now. So I like to add a little smoked salt as kind of a finishing salt on the other side of the steaks here. This also gives them a moment to sort of cook just slightly more on the other side as I'm starting to put this finishing salt on there, and it adds just this nice little smoky layer. Season however you want. So there I am, I'm pushing the steaks, comparing it to where I was pushing on the palm of my hand, and I can tell these are a nice rare to medium rare, which is how we like our steaks. And I'm going to pull these out. And I'm going to put them on a plate, but I'm going to save that other liquid. So there's our steaks. And I'm going to set this plate over to the side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let these sit here, and if there's any additional butter and juices in that pan, I'm going to just pour it over top of these steaks to let it sit here and rest on this plate. You need to let these rest, but I'm going to cover them with some foil because that's going to keep not only some of the heat in, but that's also going to let that steam that's coming off those steaks kind of redistribute the juices back into the meat. So just set that aside, give that another 3 to 5 minutes of resting time while you're getting everything else ready, and then that way we can cut these and have an amazing steak dinner. So I'm trying to give you guys a nice view here. I'm going to go ahead and take off the foil. This has been sitting here for about 4.5 minutes at this point, and I'm going to show you how beautiful these steaks come out. Now, like I said, we like ours medium rare to rare. If you like it more well done, that's up to you. You just have to cook it a little bit longer, and you may have to turn the temperature down. So I have a serving plate, and I have the plate where my steaks are resting. Okay, make sure you have a nice sharp knife and you have a pair of tongs or something else to hold these steaks because they are going to be a little messy and they're going to be a little hot, but you can see the beautiful crust that is on the top of that steak, and it is just dripping with that amazing steak juice and the fat that has come from the pan. So I've got it turned long ways right here. I'm going to turn it sideways and pick one end of the steak, whichever one's more comfortable for you based on right or left hand. I'm actually going to do this on the opposite end I would normally do, just so the camera can see this, but we're just going to do nice thick slices, and look at that beautiful steak. I can tell you when we started to eat this, it was so unbelievably good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these thick slices. You can see they're probably between 1/4 and 1/2 of an inch thick. I don't want real thin little slices because it will cool off too quickly. So I'm just going to go ahead and slice the whole steak. Now you could just serve the steak whole like they would in a steak restaurant, absolutely. I just think this is kind of nice. It's a little more refined and it makes it easier to cut at the table. And depending on the grain of your steak, it can also make it really nice if you cut it this way, so that then when the person eating it is cutting bites off of it, they can get a nice texture when they chew it. That's entirely dependent on the piece of meat that you have. But guys, look at that. A nice medium rare steak with a beautiful crust. You can see how juicy it is. The meat fibers are starting to pull apart because we've got it cooked properly. So we're going to plate it up. So I'm just going to take a plain serving plate here, okay? And you can do this however you want, make it look nice. I'm just going to kind of separate these pieces one by one, lay them out in sort of a fanned out pattern, just mostly so you can see the steak. And then I'm going to show you how we finish it. Okay guys, there is our steak all plated up. Doesn't that look absolutely gorgeous? Now let me show you how I like to finish this. This is totally optional, but I like to use a little bit more of a Redmond smoked salt, or you can use any other kind of salt you like. And I like to do a finish. This is something chefs do in restaurants. You put a little bit of a finishing salt sprinkled right over the top, right at the last minute before serving. Gives you a little bit of a crunch, a little bit extra salty flavor. Absolutely gorgeous, and it tastes amazing. The last thing we're going to do is we let that steak sit in a plate so that we can catch all of the juices that come out of it while it's resting. We're going to take these amazing resting juices and pour that right over the steak just like a sauce. It thickens up with that butter. It's beautiful. Guys, that is an incredible plate of steak right there. You can do this with any cut of steak you like. It's absolutely fantastic. It has a nice crust, and that juice is absolutely amazing. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Put a comment down below. Let me know how you're going to use this. There is our beautiful steak. This is Chris cooking Nashville. Appreciate you watching. Eat your meat, love your life, and I'll see you in the kitchen, guys.